looking back, how did you know what to do to get these banks to send cases to you?
I just talked a mean game. I think I put myself in the middle of downtown Miami, right across the street from the courthouse. My father was there. As much as I love my father, I wanted to make sure that I did not work for him. I told him, I said, listen, you and your colleagues, that's kind of how I got cases. I would say, whatever you all don't want, whatever you don't know how to handle, just send to me. I don't care what it is. So I got the reputation early on as nobody did police brutality. Rodney King gets on the news, and the next thing I know, I landed a really big police brutality case that another firm was handling. They didn't want it anymore. So that was my shtick. I was the guy that did everything. Give me whatever else you got.
Welcome to the Renegade Lawyer podcast, the show where we ask the questions, why aren't more lawyers living flourishing lives and inspiring others? And can you really get wealthy while doing only the work you love with people you like? Many lawyers are. Get ready to hear from your host, Ben Glass, the founder of the law firm Ben Glass Law in Fairfax, Virginia, and Great Legal Marketing, an organization that helps good people succeed by coaching, inspiring, and supporting law firm owners. Join us for today's conversation.
Hi, everyone. This is Ben Glass. Welcome back to the Renegade Lawyer podcast, where I get to interview folks inside and outside the legal profession who are making a ding in the world. And on today's episode, I've got Attorney Gregg Goldfarb. Greg is an attorney in Florida, 25 years practicing. Very interesting guy. A neat backstory we're going to talk about. But also, we're going to talk about how tort reform has affected one of his practice areas, what he's doing to immunize himself and his well-being, his financial well-being from that. And Greg's got his own podcast too, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So, hey, welcome to the call today, Greg.
All right. Hey, it's great being here, Ben.
Let's do a backstory first. 25 years, Florida trial attorney, running several law offices over the time. Really a wide range of cases I know from looking at your site, mass torts, class actions, some first-party insurance, which I guess is now going away in Florida. But tell our listeners how you got to where you are today.
Wow, that's a loaded question there. So, my father is an attorney. I grew up with, in that kind of a household. And very nice guy, very honest, modest guy, a very atypical kind of lawyer. Shingle on his doorstep, and he provided a nice lifestyle for me growing up, and he was just a really, really nice guy. And so I was more like my mother, and I would get upset about things and pissed off. And I back in the day, like all of a sudden there was cable news network, and this even before the internet, and I used to watch these infomercials when I couldn't go to sleep about people like get quick rich schemes. And it used to infuriate me. I'm like, how do these people, does this really work? I'd see some guy on a boat, and he'd have all these hot broads on the boat, and he'd be like, yeah, you could be like me. And I'm like, I'm going to strangle this guy. And I just wanted to sue the, whatever out of him and put him out of business. So that was one of the sort of like a little bit of the background that got me going in this world. I actually took a couple of years out of undergraduate school, and I used to write fiction. I used to write, believe it or not, poetry and short fiction. So I took 2 years, and I had a horrific car accident, a rollover, and I had to recover. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do, I remember I read a book by George Orwell, Down and Out in London. And I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to London. I'm going to live on the edge. I'm tired of having, my parents take care of me and all this. I want to go to the edge and see if I can make it happen. And from that, write fiction and poetry and see if I can make a go out of it. Well, it didn't really work financially, but I had a great experience doing that. And as I said, I had this really bad accident right before a rollover. And so when that, those 2 years kind of finished, I was in Israel, I was in North Africa. I made it all the way down to the Sahara Desert, Europe, drove across the United States. I really had an amazing 2 years. I would work, save some money, and then just do a little traveling and try to quote unquote see the world. So those 2 years ended, and I'm like, okay, now what? And I ended up in law school. So I'll stop there,
Yeah. Well, so many lawyers and other entrepreneurs that I talk to, Greg, have something weird and interesting in their background. I'm a longtime soccer referee. You had to go at fiction writing, poetry writing. Lawyers, especially trial lawyers, actually should study fiction because it's all about the development of characters. It's about heroes and villains. It's about contrasts. And, to the extent that we're trying cases, all of us have probably tried cases in the past, and many still do. It's all about, building up the drama and leading the reader or leading the jury, down a story path to a conclusion. So that's neat. But then you decide, hey, and that was a wild 2 years traveling all across different continents. I think I want to go to law school. And so what do you think was provoking you to head down that path?
Well, it was a combination of, I couldn't get into med school. My grades were not that great. I think I peaked academically when I was about 18, and I got into a couple good, universities. I got into Columbia. I got into University of Virginia. And then I got, obviously you're in these good institutions and you're dealing with, other students that are very academically, motivated and all that. And I was more of a rabble rouser, partier, I wanted to have a good time. And, so I took organic chemistry. I got a C+, and basically I was told that's the end of my medical career. So that was written out. I was thinking about being a journalist, but, it just didn't really strike a chord. So, I kind of looked at my dad and he's like, why not? And I said, you know what? I can't, when you're presented with why not, I really couldn't, it wasn't like why, it was more like why not? So, I ended up at law school.
But you did it. You did well enough to get through. You passed the bar. Have you always practiced in Florida as your primary practice state?
Yes. So I went to University of Miami because my father was in Miami. I knew that as much as I thought I was smart and, I thought I could do well academically, I also knew that I really wasn't hitting it out of the park in the university level. So I figured I would hedge my bet, start at University of Miami, and with the idea that I would start to make contacts in the local community and start building my practice. I already knew that I didn't want to work for a law firm. I knew I wasn't going to be, top 10% in the class. So I kind of wrote that all out. And even before I was, past the bar or whatever, I was already thinking like, okay, what kind of lawyer am I going to be? Trying to develop client relations and all that.
So you, out of law school, you started your own practice?
Right out of law school.
And I take it you've never worked for anyone else in the law since then?
I have never worked for anybody else. No.
And I could have predicted that based upon the story you told me about spending 2 years being a wild guy.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very unemployable, we would say.
Very unemployable. Yeah. I did work, from the time I was a young kid.
Sure.
My parents were like, you're going to go to work. Burger King, McDonald's. They were like, you're working summertime or whatever. So, I did work for, I did demonstrate that I could work for an employer.
Yeah. And I wasn't suggesting otherwise. It's a shame here we're recording this in the summer of 2023. And so many young people haven't had the experience. I think they get out of college and they haven't had the experience of working something that's kind of hard, either in a service industry, food service, McDonald's, cutting grass, working landscaping, going door to door selling, free roof estimates, anything like that to get in front of people. It's a shame. And yet these are the sort of opportunities that life sends us that lead one to say, heck yeah, I can go and I can be an entrepreneur because, that's exactly what you did. Now, would I be right in assuming that at the University of Miami School of Law, there were not many classes on entrepreneurship and building your own practice, or did they have a program?
I think there was zero, nothing.
And so what did you find, do you think, now looking back the first 5 years or so, what did you find most challenging or most surprisingly difficult or easy in starting your own gig right out of law school? That would frighten most people. Correct.
Yeah, I guess making money was obviously the biggest challenge, and and then how to operate with the trust account, make sure you didn't make any mistakes, not getting ahead of yourself. So my father was very good about like, hey, if you make some money, don't go out and blow it on some toy or whatever. Put it in the bank account and build on it. So, but my the first 5 years making money was the real big challenge. The thing that was the opposite, the flip side of the coin, was that I was actually getting interesting work, interesting trial work, even though I really didn't know what I was doing. So I started a nonprofit group called Clean Miami River. And I don't know how I came up with the idea, but basically under the Clean Water Act, they have an attorney's fee provision. So I figured, well, everybody's polluting. The whole Miami River is disgusting. Nobody would go in there if their life depended on it. So, and there's all this commercial. So I figured, well, you know what? Let's clean Miami River up. Let's find plaintiffs and sue these companies that are polluting without permits or violating their permits. And that never really worked. I never really got clients, people that were fishing or wanted to fish on the river. But what happened was some of the environmentalists that I was sort of, in that little world, they had trials and they had big trials. And sometimes the lawyers would have too many clients, too many environmental groups. They would have conflicts. One environmental group would have very little money, and the people that were running it were very difficult. They wanted a lot. So I got those clients. And before I know it, I had 2 back-to-back trials in the Everglades, in the Florida Keys, about wetlands and hurricane evacuation, carrying capacity. It's interesting now with the environment, and they're talking about how much carbon dioxide the environment can handle without, catastrophic issues or what have you. But this is like 24 years ago. We were talking about the carrying capacity of the Keys. How many people, how many toilet flushes, how much, stuff could happen there without the entire ecosystem collapsing, because the Florida Keys, it's near shore waters, it's fishing, it's tourism. And if that all goes away, the Keys is going to collapse. So we had scientists that were actually flushing toilets, and then they would study how long the pathogens would take from the flushing of the toilet to it getting out in the near shore water. So some prominent scientists or whatever were demonstrating, like 8 hours. It was really disgusting. I mean, so, and in any event, so I got, 13 weeks of trial work within the first, I would say, year of my being an attorney. And I would sit there and I had other attorneys and they would say, okay, you're going to take this witness, here's how, and I would just sit there kind of watching how they were, taking testimony and, asking questions. Hey, what's your name? What did you do? What was the result? You know what you're doing? Thank you. One of those kind of things.
That's pretty amazing, because most young lawyers, if they're starting a practice and they talk about getting other people's cases, it's mainly crappy automobile cases or low end criminal cases that require like. Now, like you, in some ways, as a very young lawyer, I was in a insurance defense firm. We were doing med mal defense in the District of Columbia. And so I got to be involved in trials, some of them long trials, but surrounded by other much more experienced lawyers. And so I would go to depositions in other cities and states and watch them and participate to the extent that I could, and then be a trial and have a couple of witnesses. And I never had the big linchpin witness in a major trial in those early years, but I got a ton of experience. I got a ton of opportunity to be up in front of juries, selecting juries and talking to juries. And so that's cool. What you did is you said, here's an opportunity. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm willing to go and figure it out and hook up with the right people. And that's the heart of entrepreneurism. Tell me a little bit about the firm now. We're 25 years in. Like, what's the largest it ever got in terms of number of people running under the roof of the firm?
So I think I've had 4 different law firms, basically me being the one running the show. The largest operation that I had was, I would say 40 employees, 5 attorneys, and a high volume practice. So at that time, that was 2008, and that was when the foreclosure crisis happened, right? So the banks were really anxious to hire other law firms outside of their normal, milieu of law firms, because they had so much work. So, so I landed, 5 pretty decent sized clients, banks, and they were just giving me all this foreclosure work. And again, I was in a situation where I'm like, I have no idea how to do, a foreclosure case. But they didn't care. They were just like, here you go. Here's 1,000 files.
Speak to the young lawyers, if you would, for a moment, Greg, who aren't even trained in and don't know how to go out and ask for work and land either single event clients or clients that can send you many events. What did you actually do? And how do you think, looking back, how did you know what to do to get these banks to send cases to you?
I just talked a mean game. I think I put myself in the middle of downtown Miami, right across the street from the courthouse. My father was there. As much as I love my father, I wanted to make sure that I did not work for him. I told him, I said, listen, you and your colleagues, that's kind of how I got cases. I would say, whatever you all don't want, whatever you don't know how to handle, just send to me. I don't care what it is. So I got the reputation early on as nobody did police brutality. Rodney King gets on the news, and the next thing I know, I landed a really big police brutality case that another firm was handling. They didn't want it anymore. They didn't know what to do. So that was the best word I could think of is a Yiddish word, and it's shtick. So that was my shtick. I was the guy that did everything, but don't give me your auto accident cases. Don't give me your slip and fall cases. Give me whatever else you got. So it just kind of built on that. And then I got a little bit of a reputation for being, the guy that could basically, take cases that nobody else wanted. And how I landed the banks, I had a partner at the time. So he was involved with that also. He was an elderly gentleman that I actually brought out of retirement. And, I had too much work and I needed somebody, another partner just to handle some things. So he was part of the, mechanism that connected us. He had a couple buddies that were in the banking world that kind of connected us to, and then we just went out, met with them and said all the right things. We can do it. We know how to operate systems, which we did. I had built up a pretty large system, for my first party insurance claims back in the day, computer, like the software that everybody's using, Filevine and all these fancy legal softwares. But I was like right at the beginning. And I mean, the problems that we used to have with the software was just, it was mind boggling. But, so I knew that I could, build up, and, handle a large volume.
I'm a little bit older than you are, but I can remember when computers first came into the law office, but then shortly thereafter, even myself, like tinkering around with simple old free database programs and creating software really that would help me just keep track of clients' cases, status of cases before anything like any of the commercially available law office management software were even being thought of.
Yeah.
And I know that over the years, you've handled tens of thousands of everything ranging from complicated mass torts. We'll talk about that in a moment. Class actions, insurance claims. I'm curious about the first party insurance claims. Now, this is an area of practice that's not universal. Virginia, for example, where I practice, has never had a lucrative, viable first party insurance claims practice area, in large part because our bad faith insurance law and our attorney fee shifting provisions are so weak. But Florida has, for years and years until most recently, been kind of a hotbed for these claims. So for those who are listening who may not even know what we're talking about. First, explain what these claims are and in that the niche that you were doing them.
All right. So in the early 1970s, I think a lot of the legislators around the country were getting agitated at the number of soft tissue whiplash, small accident cases that were in court. So I think there was about 4 or 5 states that decided they were going to shift the paradigm, and they were going to do what eventually became called PIP, personal injury protection laws. So everybody would be required. If you had a car, you needed insurance, you had to get PIP. All right. You didn't have to get bodily injury insurance, which most states require, and that would cover you if you caused an accident. You would have some money. You would have insurance proceeds that could pay the other party that you injured. So what Florida did was they said, okay, we're going to eliminate the small whiplash cases. You cannot file an automobile accident case unless you can show you have a permanent injury. And in exchange, what we're going to do is we're going to require everybody to have $10,000 of personal injury protection insurance, which is going to cover lost wages and medical bills, even if you're at fault. Okay. So you're driving. I mean, it kind of sounds right? People get into accidents. And, listen, everybody, that's their accidents. That's, it's just the way it is. You're driving around, you're pissed off, you're not paying attention, you're texting or whatever, you cause an accident. So the scheme was designed to basically reduce the litigation. And what happened really was just the opposite. Okay. It exploded. So you could have $100 x-ray that doesn't get paid by the insurance company because they didn't think it was necessary, right? So we go to court and we sue for $100. We'll sue State Farm or Allstate or whatever for $100. And we, as the attorneys, we get attorney's fees from the insurance company if we win or settle. So, all right, $100. Well, I can give you tons of stories where $400, $500 bills were contested by an insurance company. They got something crawled up their backside. They didn't like the provider. They thought that this whole kind of procedure was wacky and they wanted to make a point. They go and they fight it. They fight it years later. They are in trial and they lose. And then the judge awards $150,000 of attorney's fees. And you're like, but the bill was only $50, So I shifted into that world after doing all my crazy, difficult, kind of interesting litigation. The Wall Street Journal was following me on one of my cases, early on. And I had the Daily Business Review wrote up one of my police brutality cases, top 20 case in the state for the year or whatever. So I used to do, I was like all excited about that, but then it was keeping me up at night. So I moved into this line of work. And because it's exploded, there's a couple moving parts. One of which is the hospitals love it, okay? Because the hospitals can now get paid. In Florida, there's a lot of uninsured drivers, right? And so, people get into accidents. They can't go to insurance. They can't go to a doctor or a clinic. They go to the hospital. They go to the ER room. So the hospitals were able to get their bills paid more easier with this scheme. And so the hospitals were on the trial lawyers' side and also all these medical. So small business owners started, therapy centers, x-ray facilities. So, it enabled non-medical people to actually open up a medical facility. But there was a lot of fraud and people got upset and they would go to their legislators, whatever. So that's ending as we speak now.
That's part of the 2023 Florida tort reform changes.
Yes.
Are all of these small medical clinics that had popped up over the years?
Hey guys, this is Ben. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, not just the marketing and practice building strategies, but the philosophy of the art of living your best life parts, you should know that my son Brian and I have built a tribe of like-minded lawyers who are living lives of their own design and creating tremendous value for the world within the structure of a law practice. we invite you to join us at the only membership organization for entrepreneurial lawyers that is run by 2 full-time practicing attorneys. Check us out at greatlegalmarketing.com.
That's part of the 2023 Florida tort reform changes.
Yes.
Are all of these small medical clinics that had popped up over the years, are they just, what do you think? Are they going away?
A lot of them have already gone away. So over the years, the PIP statute would get modified. So they were always trying to figure out, because the hospitals were like, don't get rid of it. This is the only way we can get paid. So they would basically tighten one of the modifications that they made was they said, all right, only doctors can own clinics. Okay. So that eliminated 70% of the clinics, right? A lot of my clients went out of business. So that was one of the changes. Then they changed the amount of the payment to a Medicare fee schedule. That was supposed to help out as well, but it never satisfied those that were opposing the statute. Some of those that were opposing the statute are bodily injury attorneys. They want that first $10,000. They don't care it's a small accident. They would rather that they can get that scheme. Now, the change that they just made, they didn't completely write the PIP statute out, but what they did do was they basically say no more attorney's fees. So, all right, so my clients, my x-ray clients that give me bills for $400, $500, I can't really go to court on that. And the insurance companies are going to know, and they're just going to deny these bills. And that's where we're at.
So I take it, though, that, this didn't just come out of the blue overnight surprise. Like, you and other lawyers must have been anticipating these changes. And for those of you who had practices that had a lot of deal flow in that space, am I right that you could see this coming?
From day one. At the beginning, I had an opportunity. One of my colleagues had an enormously large volume practice. And he said to me, Greg, I can't take it anymore. I got so much of this stuff. Come to my office, take whatever you want. You can't take the clients, but you can take the cases. So I said, well, I don't think that because they were already talking about getting rid of the statute. So I said, all right, I'll do it. I'll go over there. I'll take 300 cases. Well, I took 300 cases. The next thing I know, it was 2 years later. I'm like, wow, I can't believe how much money I made on this. And you would basically look at the legislative time frame, March to May. May ends, no changes to the law. All right, well, you got another year. And this was going on and on. And so we would just, me and my buddies, we'd get together, we popped champagne. Hey, we made it through another year. And then actually the legislative session in 2021 or 2022 repealed the statute, and then the governor vetoed that. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening. This is like too good to be true. So, but now it's done.
And so as as the door closed on that opportunity, so to speak, I know that you have shifted or added to another practice area that you have been in, sort of the mass torts world. So talk to us a little bit about that. First, like where you are today, what you as an attorney and the firm does, but all of laws, all of business is relationship building. So talk to us a little bit too, Greg, about how you built the necessary relationships to make this a win-win for you, for the client, and for the other lawyers that you are working with.
So early on, because I was doing a variety of litigation, I had clients. I had individuals that like me. I would talk to them. They could call. So one of my clients early on, I think it was an auto accident case, really nice lady, Julie Williams. She's like, I took this thing called Fen-Phen to lose weight, and I'm seeing ads on TV that, I might have a claim, and I do have heart problems, and they interestingly developed after I started to take the weight loss thing. So I had no idea how to do it. I'm like, wow, this sounds pretty interesting. So one of my buddies in Miami, I said, hey, do you know anybody that does this kind of stuff? And there was a firm that was opening up in Pensacola. And he said, yeah, our friends are just opening up. Why don't you send it to them? So I sent it to them. Sure enough, a year and a half later, I got a really big check. I'm like, wow, this is great. I'm like, I can't believe this. I didn't do anything. I got the client. I sent it to them and then I got a check. Well, a couple of years later, different client comes to me with Vioxx. Okay. So Vioxx was for pain relief, very effective for pain relief, but also not so good for the heart. So again, I sent it back to the same firm. And again, 2 years later, I got a big check. And I was like, this is pretty good. I gotta pay attention to more of this. So then I got a hip replacement case, Stryker. Hip replacements are always difficult. Always, even, the products are bad. The operations are tricky and all that. So I got this one case, and I knew the client through a family member. The case settles. And in the mass tort world, when they settle, like you hear about a settlement, well, that's almost like the beginning of the case. Because then they got to get a certain percentage of all the people that are in the case. You could have 10,000 people. You could have 250,000, like they have in the 3M combat earplug case. You have to get a certain percentage of them to sign off, to say yes. Okay. So my client, who sort of a family member and who I like a lot, I know is a big pain in the backside. He gets a letter, like a 9-page letter. And I'm like, detailing the settlement and, top line looks good. And then the bottom line, he's like, whoa, I can't, how did it go from, 1 to 40? I'm getting 40. Why do I have to pay back my insurance company that paid for my revision or whatever? And so anyway, the firm calls me up and says, hey, Greg, the guy you sent us is being, can you talk him off the ledge, basically? So I said, sure. So I call him up and I'm like, dude, you didn't have to sit for a deposition. You didn't do anything, and you're going to get a nice check. Okay. And your hip is your hip. So are you going to say no to this? And he's like, I know, but come on. If I would have known about this, I said, if you would have known, if I would tell you, 3 years ago that you're going to get a check for $100,000 or 75 grand doing nothing, you're going to tell me you're going to say no. So anyway, as that case was, I was already like, I got to get out of the PIP world. It's going to end. This has been too many years. We've gotten lucky too many times. I think this was after the governor vetoed. And so the law firm that I was working with, I called him up. I said, hey, don't worry. He's going to sign off on it. Right. And they said to me, well, did you hear about the breaking news? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I was like, whatever. And they're like 3M. And I'm like, Googling 3M whistleblower. There was a whistleblower case that ended. And so then it became public knowledge. And so they're like, are you going to get in? And I'm like, absolutely.
That's the 3M earplugs, right?
3M earplugs. Yeah, absolutely. But I had no idea. At this point, the legal marketing world had evolved way beyond what I ever understood. I mean, I thought, people were sending out newsletters, people would be on bus benches, billboards. I thought that was kind of it. I did not know really what was going on. So eventually, after I tried to get cases organically and it didn't work, I said to them, so, you have a recommendation, maybe somebody, that can help me out. So they set me up with a legal marketing outfit, and, away I went. And so then the next thing I know, I've got all these cases, and I'm like, I'm not going to do these cases. I don't know really how to do it. And they're big cases. I can't really mess them up. And so I ended up referring them back to the same firm, and they, we had a nice little arrangement, and, that started the whole mass tort thing. And then push came to shove. I went to some conferences. I got extremely impressed with the industry. Like, I could not believe how big, how collaborative, how impressive the lawyers were. I was stunned at how exceptional they were. So it just motivated. I'm like, all right, I'm all in,
That's really interesting you said that, because a lot of lawyers who are on the ground look at, say, even mass advertisers, even people who firms who spend a lot of money to get auto cases, and they oftentimes will speak disparagingly of the firms or the quality of the lawyering. But what I found, as you did, Greg, is when you get to meet the people who are running these firms, you see that they are insanely good at every step of the customer journey, including being able to try really complex cases. So everything they do, from the marketing to acquiring the cases to winning, settling the cases, they're taking great risks oftentimes, depending on at what point they get into the particular mass tort, multi-claimant, game. But they are really great lawyers. Let me ask this: when you were advised to go and to get a firm and to help you acquire these 3M cases, how big was your own team at that point?
So I had already scaled way, way down. I was maybe like a 6-person operation at that time. And that's, my employees love me, but that's a problem. Why do they love me? I'm not exactly a quiet guy. I'm like, sort of a screamer, but, I just said, you know what? I don't want to be an employer. I don't want to hire somebody to manage my employees. I had already done that. And so that person didn't work out. So one of my colleagues was like, well, get somebody better. And I'm like, I just don't want to, I don't want to spend so much time at so many issues, administration, hiring, firing, supervising. It just was not, I don't want to do that. I just, I'm sure I could do it well if I really put my mind.
Maybe. Look, everybody has their gifts, right? And I think what we're called to do is to use our own gifts, talents, and interests to build whatever the heck it is that we want to build for ourselves. And for some, it's big firms with a lot of management and layers and people. And for others, it's like, no, maybe been there, done that, and I don't want to do it anymore. But what I'm curious is, you had around 6, and now you're investing in acquiring cases that are coming in. So you are still able to manage that inflow and whatever vetting needed to be done with the 6, and then finding the lawyers that you were going to work with. Is that?
Yeah. So right out of the gate, let's just say, right now, the last mass tort campaign that I've gotten into is, as it's called, EzerCare Artificial Tears. So it's an artificial tear that, like you drop it in your eyes, you have dry eyes or whatever. Yeah. It's preservative free. Well, it's really a horrible product. So it's already been taken off the shelves. People are like going blind. Some people have actually had to have their eyes removed. So I've now been around the block for 3 years doing all these marketing, going to conferences, meeting people. With my podcast, I bring a lot of the bigger name lawyers onto my podcast to talk about these topics. I love the topics. I don't love them. I think they're fascinating. Environment, the water contamination, sex abuse by the church, the Boy Scouts. They're horrible stories. But it's far more interesting than your standard whiplash, automobile, slip and fall case, right? Something I could get my brain around. I'm a storyteller. That's kind of what I like to do, whatever. So one of the marketers, I have these marketers now chasing after me all the time. Oh, we've got a new quotes on prices and all, well, here are the 25 best campaigns going on. You got to get in, right? Every sales tactic. And I'm pretty gullible to a lot of this. So one of them came to me and said, look at this product. It's not that big. So some of the problems with like the 3M earplug case is it's so big. There's so many people. There's just, it's almost unwieldy. They've tried so many cases. You would think after losing 13 times 3M to the tune of $300 million, 3M would say, all right, we got to settle this, but they want to fight. Johnson & Johnson, they fight tremendously. So now I'm sort of thinking, well, maybe let me go to the smaller ones where, there's not so much at stake that maybe, they're creating these horrific products. Maybe they'll want to, close them out or whatever. So once the marketer contacts me, they've already they know which law firms are leading the charge. So typically there's one law firm that uncovers the problem and then they start marketing, and then a few other law firms, and then the bigger name law firms basically say they're all in or not. And then once that happens, you, as an attorney like myself, I want to go with the ones that are going to be what we call in leadership. So they'll be the ones trying the cases. When there's settlement or mediation talks, they're going to be the ones that are doing the talking. So I want to be connected with them. I want to send my work to them, refer the stuff to them. And so the marketer will tell me, even though I don't know as or care from anything, but she already knew who was leading the charge. And I know that that law firm has an outstanding reputation. So from my end, I was like, hey, new law firm, new contacts. I can learn something new, see how they operate, and bring on new guests on my podcast.
I've talked to some of these marketers too, and they often know a lot more, at least profess to know about jurisdiction, about judges, about motions to transfer venue. And it is a very sophisticated world. And people who haven't been at those conferences have no idea, I don't think, of the scale of the money involved. I heard one person say, and I think it's true, is like, if I ever come back to live again, I want to be a mass tort vendor.
Yeah.
So what you say, Greg, somebody is listening to this. They're like, well, that sounds pretty cool. Like the dude, he transitioned out of a practice area that the Florida legislature was killing off. He had some experience over here. Now he's been, as you said, you've been around the block a few times, right? So someone who's listening to this and says, okay, that's interesting. Mass torts, that's interesting. What would be your 1, 2, 3 top level advice for someone who really doesn't have any experience yet, but wants to get into this world in some way, shape, or form? Probably, I think, most likely as a case acquirer. What do they do? Is it a conference? Is it a book? Is it a podcast? Where do they start?
Well, I would, listen, they can call me. All right. Cause I've already spent, probably hundreds of hours learning what not to do and who not to be affiliated with. And so, it's like almost an add-on to my law firm now, is I am basically part of the package. I'll get you connected to the best marketer. I'll get you connected to the best law firm, and I'll be basically part of the referring team. It's not going to be money out of your pocket, but that's how I operate. So the marketers and the law firms that I'm connected with, put me on the team. Essentially, I'm like almost part of the package. That's one way you can do it, or you could try to learn it on your own. So some people I've had, I probably brought 6 of my colleagues who are similar to me, and they see that, they're doing the same line of work, and they're like, boy, they got to transition. So they've already kind of come to me and said, or I told them, hey, what about this? Right. So I said, well, a good way to start is, you come up with some money, you get some cases, you get them referred out, and then you see how it goes. Okay. So some of them have been like, whoa, I want to do the work myself. I don't want to refer it out. So typically my advice is like, look, get the cases in, send them out, see how the law firms are handling it. You can be as intimately involved as they'll let you. I mean, you can see the pleadings and all that. You can see how these cases develop. And then you can learn from that. And then you can get your own cases also. You could, let's say Camp Lejeune. Everybody's all goo goo gaga about Camp Lejeune because the government is basically thrown in the towel. They're going to soft fight it, like a little pillow fight, right? Just to make sure you're legitimate. But there's so many cases out there, I think, that you can go ahead, acquire 25 cases, 30 quick cases, send them out to one of the law firms, and then get 25, 30 cases and do it on your own. Now, you got to be careful because Camp Lejeune is probably not going to present you with the type of nefarious actions that happen in mass tort world. So mass tort world, some law firms, they want to do the same thing. They want to scale up, get a lot of cases, but they don't want to be on the forefront. They just want to wait till the whole thing settles, and then they're going to get a big check. And that's the way it used to work. But now they're not. Now the 3Ms and the Johnson & Johnsons of the world, they're getting smart. They're saying, you know what? We're going to let those people on their own. We're not settling with that law firm. We're going to let you, your 20,000 cases that you've been sitting doing nothing with for 3 or 4 years, go ahead. Let's see what you can do. Imagine if you had even if you had 100 lawyers, 20,000 cases, it's hard to really move that kind of a docket.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, complex world. And I do think, so anyone who's listening to this, I think they'd be wise to take you up on your offer to at least make a call down to you to get some guidance from somebody who's trustworthy about this. I mean, God bless the vendors, right, and the marketers, but there's a reason why they're calling and pitching each of these different types of claims, and talking to somebody who's got now this broad-based experience, I think would be very helpful. Tell us a little bit, Greg, in the last couple of minutes here about Cut to the Chase, your podcast. I'm curious about, I know why I do the Renegade Lawyer podcast. I'm curious about what you're doing with Cut to the Chase.
So, Cut to the Chase is basically, I love public interest stories. I love stories. Okay. So it was my way of telling stories through a guest, just like what you have with me. So a lot of my guests are the lawyers that are handling these mass tort cases, and they give updates. They explain what's going on. And usually most of these mass tort cases are fascinating. I mean, they're, disturbingly fascinating. So part of my podcast is mass centric oriented. Part of it is public issue, public interest oriented. It could be, I love like the recycling industry. I think it's a fascinating industry. Plastics, how are we going to deal with plastics? So I bring on scientists to talk about, nuclear fusion. And I just love to challenge myself, and it's a way for me to also learn. I'm just like intellectually curious. So, I have a physics friend of mine. He's been on my show like 10, 15 times. And we did everything, the planets, the solar system, the earth, gravity, the Hubble telescope, the James Webb telescope, all that. So that was kind of all right, I'm not really even sure what I wanted to accomplish out of it, except that I wanted to learn, connect with interesting people, and see where it went,
Exactly.
If I made money, great. If I don't, and it goes nowhere and nobody listens to it, all right. But, I think some people are listening to it.
But the cool thing is you get to talk to people who probably would never have spoken to you, right? They're not named about them, and they have stories to tell. And I think so. One of our principles is like, be a forever learner. Like, don't stop learning just because you finished school someplace. What do you do when you're not doing legal stuff? What's your hobbies, adventure stories?
So I'm a big golfer, tennis player. I was a pretty good athlete growing up. So, I'm just kind of refusing to allow the aging process to take over. So I play a lot of golf, a lot of tennis. My partner, my girlfriend of many years, is an artist. And so, and she's does public artwork, does very interesting stuff. So I like marketing also. So I like to I'm her art director. And so I like to market her and live her world, go out to art shows, and, she's like a social butterfly. So if I have 2 nights off a week where I don't have to be nice and charming, it's almost a miracle. I have and then I probably read 3 or 4 hours a day just on like all the same topics that we're talking about.
Well, it's very cool to take what you've learned in the legal industry about marketing and acquiring, and now taking that to the art industry with your partner, and I'm sure bringing even a different flavor to it.
Yeah.
Well, look, this has been great, folks. Greg, if people want to go and see what you're doing, check out website, get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
All right. So there's never a simple answer from me, as many of my closest friends will tell you. So my GreggGoldfarb.com, is my website, but I'm the original 3G, GREGG, and then GOLDFARB.com. Website will give you, all the ways to get in touch with me.
That's awesome. Well, look, thanks for spending the time with us. You've shared a bunch of valuable stuff, and hopefully we've inspired. Particularly, I like to inspire young lawyers. Like you did some things that, Greg, you took risks. You went into areas that you, by just the book smarts world, had no business getting into. But you wanted the challenge, and most importantly, I think you affiliated yourself with guys and gals who were a little bit farther along the path than you, and who were willing to share what they knew about some of these complex, esoteric cases that you did early in your career. So thanks for spending some time with us today.
All right. Thanks for having me on the show, Ben. And, glad to meet you.
Absolutely.
If you like what you just heard on the Renegade Lawyer podcast, you may be a perfect fit for the great legal marketing community. Law firm owners across the country are becoming heroes to their families and icons in their communities. They've gone renegade by rejecting the status quo of the legal profession so they can deliver high-quality legal services coupled with top-notch customer service to clients who pay, stay, and refer. Learn more at greatlegalmarketing.com. That's greatlegalmarketing.com.